Thank you so much for joining us, Samir. Could you tell us a little bit about the Raisina Dialogues 2023?
So this year, the dialogue, of course, will have to focus on some of the big challenges that confront all of us as countries, as communities, as peoples. Lots of uncertainty, lots of turbulence, lots of provocations. We are all seeking solutions. We are all in search for answers. We are all in search for leadership that can safely steer us through these choppy tides. And in that sense, lighthouse in the tempest, the theme of Raisina this year, which is in the backdrop of the uncertainties and provocation and turbulence, seeks to discuss those difficult questions with a cross section of stakeholders, with a purpose of at least allowing various perspectives to occupy the same room and the same space, and thereafter hopefully help us in creating pathways that are beneficial for all. And that's the purpose of Raisina this year, very, very reflective of the times we live in, and hopefully serving the purpose of finding or eliminating pathways for this moment.
Right. How do you see India providing a leadership role in these issues?
Look, India in many ways is the garage of solutions today. Not because we have solved everything, but because we are confronted with such a vast array of challenges that we will have to continue to respond to them. India has an experience of responding to challenges at scale, and responding to challenges that cut across various demographic divides of age and gender and ethnicities and language and customs and costumes. And therefore, India's experiences of navigating through these difficult times may resonate with many more people than, say, for example, a European or a North American experience would do, simply because there are 6 billion other inhabitants of this planet who have far more or relatively far more coherent challenges and experiences to respond to as the Indians do. And therefore, India is in many ways the lighthouse in the tempest. It is not because India has solved everything, it is because India is making a serious attempt and a serious effort to respond to these multifaceted tough times that await it.
This year also we are hosting G20, and a lot of your guests, we've just finished having. How do you see the synergy between Raisina and G20?
Look, the G20 will also have to deal with the same questions.
Yeah.
G20 is not oblivious of the moment we live in. If you look through India's G20 priorities, they pretty much mirror what we are trying to discuss at Raisina, be it the question of climate change, sustainable lifestyles, the Prime Minister's life mission, questions of SDGs and hunger and food and fertilizers and fuel, the questions of multilateralism reforms and how do we make development banks work for people who seek that financing. The G20 in many ways this year will have to walk down the same path that confronts all of us in any case. So Raisina in many ways complements India's G20 presidency, supporting it in some ways by incubating debates that are wholesome and that are multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional, but also has views from many countries outside of the G20. Right. So we have 103 countries at Raisina this year. Many of them have shared their thoughts and views in over 100 programs that we have, panels and conversations we have hosted this year. Hopefully they would feel included in the debates that India is undertaking. Hopefully some of their ideas would find place in the outcomes that we propose. So we are pretty much walking in tandem and in sync with the Indian G20 presidency.
Where India is concerned, by and large, we've heard people across the world tell us that we are not going to do too badly in terms of recession. So what are the other areas you think India, can shine, is shining, and can also set an example, and also have, therefore be a leader and, come and talk about it in Raisina?
Look, we are not going into a recession.
Yeah.
But let's be very clear, we are facing economic headwinds.
Yeah.
We could have grown faster had the old continent not decided to engage in a new conflict. We could have done better had the pandemic not crippled many other economies and industries. So, even though we are relatively well off, we could have been far better off had the pandemic not affected us, had the European conflict not carried some of the tailwinds that are shaking our journey. Now, having said that, we have an economic story to tell. We were resilient through the pandemic. We have stabilized our economic journey through the conflict. We are going to be, and we are going to be the fastest growing large economy in the world. So there is an economic story to tell, and we had the finance minister today speak to the audience, right, sharing with them the Indian decision making process, what the concerns that were attended to, some decisions that have been taken in terms of economic priorities. So there is an economic story to share, which we were trying to do through this dialogue, but there is also a digital story to tell, right? And we are hosting we have hosted a discussion on lifting people using the power of technology. We are a significant in many ways designer of how to use technology at scale to benefit so many in so many different sectors, from health and the vaccination to payments and the banking system to financial inclusion and entrepreneurship. We have used technology to its fullest, right? And this is another story to share. Yeah. Similarly, we are going to be the greenest $5 trillion economy. There is no big economy in the world that has a carbon footprint per capita as low as India. Now, there is a story to be told there as well, and that is something that we are sharing there as well. There are a number of such development areas, economic areas, political areas, where we may not have the perfect answer, but we have an answer that is appropriate and efficient. There is an answer that is contextual and empathetic, and those should be available for everyone to experience, hear, discuss, debate, perhaps even adopt and embrace. And that was the purpose of this dialogue.
Right. So you've have curated 5 pillars for this. Can you tell us a little bit about the 5 pillars and a little explanation of each one of them?
Look, the names are fancy, yeah, but at the core of it, what are the key concerns that matter to all of us, right? And as far as the team that was helping design this conference was concerned, we had to look at the big questions of our times. What were those, right? The first, of course, was the question of the format of governance and globalization, trade and economic arrangements, and what is the kind of international architecture and engagement that is likely to emerge. Is it going to be unipolar? Is it going to be multipolar? Are there going to be convenient clubs? Are these clubs going to be based on ideology or ethics, or are they going to be amoral, looking at efficiency and outcomes, right? So that clearly was a cluster of issues we were looking at. The second, of course, we can't ignore is technology and its relationship with both the state and the individuals, communities, technology for good, the harms of technology. If India has lifted people through technology, how do we work to keep this domain safe? How do we protect it from malicious actors? And I think that was again another clutch of issues. Then, of course, climate change is the single biggest crisis, threat, challenge all of us confront, and we have to look at this as a problem without passports. And therefore, clearly we were looking at these cross-border questions around climate, around certain other development aspects, including water, food and fuel and fertilizers, that became essential to engage with. In fact, I am very happy to share with you that this time we actually for the first time hosted a significant conversation on water security, water for all, pipe water for all. Drinking water is taken for granted, but it's not necessarily that easily available. And we had experts from Italy and Israel and India and UK and other parts who came together to knock heads and try to see how we can achieve this ambition for all human beings on this planet. What could we learn from India's own experiences in this particular sector, and how can technology and finance catalyze it? So again, that was another set of issues that became vitally important. Now, the last 3 years have also shown us the propensity of conflict to resurface. War, peace, conflict, and of course the weaponization of various domains. And as you saw today in the panels that we hosted on day 3, we were looking at some of these new dimensions of conflict and what it means for folks. What does it mean for security of nations? How should nations adjust their defense postures, and how should we respond to some of these very fast evolving new threat landscapes that are emerging? And that became a whole set of questions that have defined the program through all of this. And you know, before I just touch on another issue, one of the cross-cutting themes through each of the pillars or the drivers of the design was the question of inclusion, gender. How do we bring women into leadership roles, not merely providing them with jobs at the bottom of the pyramid or minimal inclusion, but looking at women entrepreneurship, women leadership, how women are using technology to change the world. And we discussed that again this morning yesterday at a session, and again a big focus area for us across all themes. Perhaps we have to be humble enough to admit that the state of affairs of the world requires new thinking, and perhaps women leadership is that new thinking, and we need to allow that new thinking to lead us. So I think that was again something that we really focused on. Now, besides these big questions, I think we all now admit that whether it's the United Nations, whether it is multilateralism as we know it, and whether it is the international relations that have defined our last few decades, all of them need rejuvenation, reset, reforms. Sometimes perhaps they need to be demolished and rebuilt. And some of those big questions around the UN and around some of these institutions are again part of this program. So I think our pillars were not constructed. In many ways they wrote themselves. The times have written that for us. We were just listening to what this moment was telling us as being essential for all of us to talk to.
Okay, last question. You know, ORF as Raisina Dialogues has come to occupy a very important place right now, and also where India is today in the G20 and all of that. And we've seen some amazing sessions that have happened. What, according to you thought was the most important thing that came out of this year, which really gladdened you and made you feel that, okay, yeah, we've done something worthwhile, or we've discussed it or talked or pointed out? Or
you know, so at a personal level, I think I take pride in two specific panels. The first panel that I'm really thrilled about is that we were able to host the first public panel with all the 4 Quad ministers. Why I am proud about it is because some years ago we hosted the 4 admirals of the Quad. And let me tell you, when we were doing that, all countries were hesitant, especially in Delhi. There was some degree of skepticism on where it could lead. Some years later, there you go, we have the 4 Quad foreign ministers sitting, clearly signaling that that initial hesitancy from all of the participants has disappeared. It's a public forum which takes bold decisions, which came out with a joint statement that was again quite forward looking, and that for me was certainly satisfying. That's something that we were trying to incubate in its very early infancy, has now become an adult and has left this particular conference behind. It is far ahead of what all of us talk about. That's one thing. And the second was, for me, we were able to, for the first time again, host two region focused panels, 2 of them, which we have not done before. The first was, we brought together a few foreign ministers from the Middle East to discuss this very important region for India. And I think that also signifies how India is approaching and looking at that region, right? Again, it's a panel for the times. That part of the world is going to be perhaps India's closest companion and partner in its journey in the coming decade and more. And we were able to bring together the ministers from Oman and from Egypt and from UAE and have a conversation on how from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea we can create a whole new economic future, security future, etc. So that was one of the regions that we were able to do for the first time. And the second was we had a panel on Latin America. Again, something that we normally would not associate with a dialogue that was interested earlier in only the Indo-Pacific or Europe, or perhaps a little bit of America. So Latin America was again something that was really, really pleasing for me, that we were able to bring Mexico, Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina together in a discussion in Delhi, understanding the dynamics of that continent. That continent is again going to be a very important part of India's journey. As we reach $5 trillion, I have no doubt India's economic footprint is going to compel it to be far more deeply engaged in that region. And it's a matter of a few years. So in a few years, we have to build institutions that can carry this relationship forward. And I'm quite happy that we were able to contribute to that path today.
Are you thinking about the next one?
Oh yeah. So I'm thinking about the dates, but before that we have a Raisina Diplomats forum, which is a future diplomacy forum in October. We are thinking of a dialogue in Australia that we launched this year. We have the main Raisina again in a year's time, but between that, and I'm not at a liberty to announce it right now, we are probably going to add a few more twists and turns to the Raisina journey, maybe a few more destinations and a few more formats. So I'm excited about Raisina because it is something that is being embraced by many. Folks recognize it as a platform that is vibrant, inclusive and open. Everyone is not happy with every session or every discussion, but everyone knows that they have a chance to express their views. And as an open, inclusive platform, Raisina offers rather a space that is becoming rare these days.
On that note, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.